Ambition is the final refuge of the faithless. It is the cracking of the soul's foundation, the first microscopic fissure through which the darkness of the immaterium begins to seep. For in a galaxy defined by duty to desire for oneself is the first and perhaps the last true heresy. Attributed to Cardinal Evandus, later declared, excommunicate traitoris. The galaxy is darkness. This is the only truth that matters in the 41st millennium. The stars themselves are but pinpricks of cold light in an oppressive, suffocating void, and humanity is a dying ember guttering against an eternity of night. We are a species clinging to the wreckage of a forgotten golden age, besieged on all sides by horrors that defy sanity. The Xenos, with its alien hunger and unknowable designs, tears at our borders. The traitor, the heretic, the mutant rots us from within a cancer of the soul, spreading through the heart of the Imperium. And beyond it all, beyond the veil of what we call reality, there is the laughter of thirsting gods. In this age of endings, mankind has but one shield faith, unquestioning, absolute, ironclad faith in the God-Emperor of mankind. It is the shield that holds the line on 1,000 worlds. It is the fire in the heart of the Astra Militarum soldier as he fixes his bayonet against an orc war. It is the certainty in the mind of the battle sister as she purges the unclean with holy fire. It is the vow of the space marine, a promise of service that extends beyond the veil of death itself. We are taught that service is the highest calling, that sacrifice is the greatest glory, and that death in the Emperor's name is the ultimate reward, a final peaceful reunification with the master of mankind. But this is a lie. It is the most pervasive, necessary lie in a galaxy built upon them. For there is another promise. A promise whispered not from the pulpits of the ecclesiarchy, but from the blood-slicked altars of forbidden cults. A promise that echoes in the silent chambers of a chapter master's heart, as he feels the slow, inevitable decay of his transhuman body. A promise that screams into the mind of an inquisitor who has seen too much, who knows that the Imperium's weapons are not enough to win the eternal war. A promise that slithers into the study of a cardinal whose prayers for deliverance have been met only by the suffocating silence of an empty throne. It is the promise of power, not the fleeting temporal power of a planetary governor or a fleet admiral, but real power. The power to shape reality, the power to crush enemies not just in body but in soul, and most seductive of all, it is the promise of time, immortality. What is the vow of a space marine, a service of a mere few centuries when measured against an eternity of glorious conquest? What is the authority of an inquisitor bound by the archaic rules of the Senatorum Imperialis, when he could wield the very energies of the cosmos as a weapon? What is the faith of a cardinal when he could become the god that people pray to? This is the seed of the ultimate heresy. This ambition, this desire to transcend the flesh, to escape the petty confines of mortality, to cheat the grand grim equation of the universe. There is a name for this blasphemous ascension. The occult texts call it apotheosis, the 13th fell benediction, the final coronation. To the damned, it is the ultimate prize. To those who understand its nature, it is the final irreversible punctuation of a sentence passed down upon the soul the very moment ambition was allowed to fester. The process of becoming a demon prince is not a reward. It is not a gift freely given. It is the culmination of a parasitic bargain. It is the final horrific harvest of a soul that has been cultivated, warped, and devoured from within over centuries of atrocity and betrayal. It is the moment a mortal, once perhaps a shining beacon of humanity, drowns completely, their hand finally slipping from the ledge of their own identity, plunging into the infinite ocean of the warp. They cease to be them and become it, an instrument, a slave, a monstrous puppet of solidified rage or despair or cunning or sensation, given form and terrible, terrible purpose. This is not a single path, for the ruinous powers are masters of temptation, and they tailor the hook to the prey. It can be the path of the warrior, a lord of the Adeptus Astartes, whose desire for martial perfection and victory at any cost leads him to whisper prayers to the god of battle. He seeks strength to protect his charges and finds only an insatiable thirst for skulls. His quest for victory becomes a quest for slaughter. It can be the path of the scholar and inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus who believes he can wield the archenemy's weapons against it. He pores over forbidden law, binds minor entities, performs unsanctioned rites, all in the name of knowing the foe. He does not realize that to know the foe is to become it, that every whispered secret from the warp is a chain link, and every tool he masters is another's hand closing around his own. Or it can be the path of the pious, a cardinal or confessor whose faith cracks under the sheer unrelenting horror of the galaxy. He sees the suffering, the futility, the endless sacrifice with no reward, and his belief curdles into despair. He seeks a new master, one that offers tangible blessings in exchange for devotion, one that loves its children by freeing them from the burden of hope and encasing them in the numb embrace of entropy. This is the story of that journey, not of the destination, but of the damnation. It is a chronicle of the price demanded for godhood and the chilling realization that the payment is eternity. It is the anatomy of a fall, the dissection of a soul, and the gruesome, agonizing birth that follows. What is the price of becoming a god? Everything. Absolutely everything. And it is a price paid not once but forever. The Bridge of the Iron Will was a cathedral of solemn purpose, its armored viewport a vast godlike eye overlooking the subjugated world of Xylos Prime. At its center, standing immobile as a statue of polished ceramite, was Lord Commander Arturos, Chapter Master of the Crimson Sabres. His crimson armor, articulated and ancient, was scarred with the honors of 2 centuries of warfare. The tactical display of the hololith bathed his noble, time-worn features in a cold blue light, reflecting off the twin service studs hammered into his brow. Around him, chapter serfs and servitors moved with hushed reverence. His every breath was a command, his slightest gesture a verdict. He had just concluded the Xylos pacification. A world of billions infected by a Xenos-worshipping creed had been brought back to the Emperor's light. It had taken 9 months of grinding, merciless urban warfare. It had cost him 3 companies of his finest warriors, a dozen ships of the auxiliary fleet, and casualties among the supporting guard regiments that were beyond counting. But he had won. The triumphal data slate lay on the command lectern before him, confirming the execution of the final cult patriarch. Another world secured, another victory for the Imperium, another jewel in the crown of Arturos. He was the epitome of an Adeptus Astartes. Strong, resolute, a strategic genius, a demigod of war to the mortals who served him. His name was spoken with awe from Segmentum Solar to the eastern fringe. Yet as he stared into the swirling orbital debris of the world he had just saved, Arturos felt nothing. The familiar surge of righteous pride, the cold satisfaction of a difficult duty performed, was absent. In its place was a hollow, echoing emptiness, a chill that had nothing to do with the void outside. He saw not the victory, but the cost. He saw the 9 months of attrition. He saw the endless grinding inefficiency of it all. He saw a galaxy where for every world like Xylos he reclaimed, 2 more fell to darkness. He was a giant, standing in the ocean, dutifully plugging 1 leak in a colossal dam, while the sea poured in through 100 others just out of his reach. The chill became a frigid certainty during the final assault on the Patriarch's spire. Arturos and his honor guard had teleported directly into the inner sanctum, a place of cyclopean, non-Euclidean architecture that defied imperial reason. The Patriarch, a creature of bloated flesh and alien grafts, had been surrounded by its inner circle. The battle was brutal, as all such close-quarters engagements were. But then a new entity had emerged. It was not a Xenos. It was a Chaos Lord, A being of nightmare clad in baroque pulsating armor that seemed more flesh than metal. Arturos had met its charge, his relic blade, Truth's bite, blazing with power. They had clashed, and for the first time in a century, Arturos had been found wanting. The creature was not just strong, it was eternal. It moved with a speed that defied its bulk, its laughter a psychic toxin that caused Arturos's own warriors to stagger, clutching their helms. It had shattered Arturos's storm shield with a casual backhand, the ancient artifact disintegrating into fragments of adamantium and faith. It had scarred Arturos's breastplate, the burning talon marks searing through ceramite and biting deep into his transhuman flesh, a pain so profound, so unnatural, that he had roared in shock as much as agony. The creature had not stayed to finish the fight. It had simply smiled a look of contemptuous pity and stepped sideways out of reality, vanishing as if it were never there, leaving the patriarch to be cut down by the enraged chapter master. Now, hours later, in the medicabae of the Iron Will, Arturos stared at the wound. The apothecaries had done their work. The flesh was sealed, the antitoxins administered. But the scar remained a weeping dark rift in his chest that throbbed with a cold, ethereal energy. It would not heal properly. It felt alive. He dismissed the apothecaries, ignoring their protests. He stood alone in his private chambers, the scriptorium of the chapter master. He deactivated his armor, letting the heavy plates hiss and unlock, falling away to reveal the scarred landscape of his body. He was a giant among men, yes, but the dual hearts in his chest hammered with a weariness that frightened him. His advanced Laraman's organ had sealed the wound, but he could feel the alien energy of it, a mockery of his own biological perfection. He looked at his hands. They were strong, capable of crushing a man's skull. But they were old. By Astartes standards, he was in his late prime, but the centuries were accumulating. He could feel the slightest loss of speed, the faintest ache in his joints on cold, void mornings. He was mortal. The realization struck him with the force of a battle cannon. Lord Commander Arturos, a son of the Emperor, was finite. He would serve, he would fight, and one day he would slow. He would be struck down by a lucky shot, a greater foe, or simply the weight of his own unending duty. And the war would continue without him. The leaks in the dam would multiply. The Imperium he had bled for would continue its slow, agonizing decay. It is not enough, he whispered, the sound shocking in the silence of the holy room. He had dedicated his entire existence to service. But what was that service if it was doomed to end? What was the point of his strength if it was ultimately insufficient? The Chaos Lord? It had possessed a power that transcended the physical, a power that laughed at mortality, a power that could win. A new, terrifying thought entered his mind, coiling there like a serpent. I must do more. I must be more. It was not a thought of service. It was not a prayer to the Emperor. It was a desire born of fear, nurtured by pride, and watered by the cold, undeniable taste of his own limitation. It was the first and most dangerous of all heresies, the belief that his will, his ambition, could achieve what his duty could not. The pacification of Xylos Prime was officially complete, but Arturos could not leave. He told his fleet it was to oversee the commencement of imperial reorganization, to ensure every last seed of heresy was burned to ash. It was a lie. He was searching. He returned to the Patriarch's spire, to the place where he had fought the Chaos Lord, where he had received his unhealing scar. He ordered his honor guard to maintain an outer perimeter, claiming he needed to perform the final rites of purification himself. A chapter master in solitary prayer was a holy enough sight that none dared question it. He walked alone through the charred ruins. The shattered eye socket of the impossible architecture stared at him with mockery. He followed a feeling, a pull. It came not from his Auspex scanner, but from the weeping, scarred flesh of his chest. It was an unseen compass guiding him down. Down a hidden, spiraling staircase, the Purge teams had missed into a subterranean vault that existed on no architectural schematic. The air here was freezing and thick. The light from his helm lenses seemed to be swallowed just feet from his face. In the center of the octagonal chamber, on a pedestal of glistening basalt, was a book. It did not look overtly grotesque. It did not scream or drip blood. It was simply wrong. It was bound in a thick, scaled leather that felt hard as iron and was held shut by a clasp of tarnished brass. The clasp was shaped like an 8-pointed star, but cleverly wrought to resemble the twin-tailed imperial comet. Every nerve in Arturos's gene-enhanced body, every lesson hammered into his brain since he was an aspirant, screamed one command: destroy it. Purge it with fire. Do not touch. He reached out. His gauntleted finger touched the clasp. It was void-cold, a chill that bit through the ceramite. He thought of the Chaos Lord. He thought of its power. He thought of its pitying smile. To know the foe. It was the justification he offered himself. He unhooked the clasp. The book did not fall open. He slotted it into one of his armor's utility pouches beneath a blessed scriptum, a silent blasphemy. He returned to the iron will, his heart's hammering out a foreign, guilty rhythm. In his private scriptorium, he placed the book on his ancient oak desk. The room was sealed against all intrusion, physical and sonic. The door was locked. The ship's prayer wards and Geller field emitters hummed faintly, trying in vain to counter the presence of the thing on the desk. He removed his gauntlet. With his bare flesh and blood hand, he touched the cover. This time it spoke. There was no voice in his head. No demonic whisper reached his ear. Instead, images vivid and stark flooded his mind. He saw future campaigns. He saw a massive orc fleet massing in the Garan Nebula, a threat Imperial augurs would not detect for another 6 months, by which time it would be too late. He saw a Genestealer cult silently corrupting his chapter's own homeworld right under the noses of his chaplains. He saw the paths to victory. Swift, decisive, almost bloodless victories. He saw himself standing on the ashes of his enemies, filled not with hollow weariness, but with absolute certainty. An idea formed like oil spreading on still water. You fight in the dark, it communicated. You fight with rules that bind you while your enemy has none. We can give you light. Not the blind light of a dead emperor, but the cold, clear light of truth. You wish to protect the Imperium. You wish to fulfill your oath. Then see. No, use the tools they fear. The book remained closed. He could not open it. The pages seemed fused together. The temptation was agonizing. To know, to anticipate, to never be caught unprepared again. Arturos's arrogance, ever his greatest virtue, and his greatest sin, took command. He was strong enough. He was a chapter master. He could look into this abyss, and the abyss would not look back. He could use this power, bend it to his will, and discard it when he was done. The book demanded a key. The images showed him. An act of will, a token of acceptance. He took his ritual dagger, a blade he normally used to seal vellum scrolls with his chapter's wax. The silver blade was inscribed with prayers against hubris. He stared at it for a long moment. To kill a heretic was an act of faith. To kill an ally, to hide a secret, that was a different path. But this was merely knowledge, he told himself. Driven by curiosity and a fatal pride, he drew the blade in a shallow cut across his palm. Astarte's blood, precious and potent, welled up. He pressed his hand to the star-shaped clasp. His blood sizzled on contact. A low hiss like water on hot iron filled the silent room. The clasp absorbed his blood, its dull brass color flashing a brilliant, angry red for 1 second before fading. He heard a single sibilant sigh, like an ancient tome opening for the first time in centuries. And the book fell open. The pages, made of a paper-thin, leathery vellum, were covered in winding, impossible script. As he stared, it began to rearrange itself. It twitched and coiled like worms on a hook. And then it settled. He could read it. Instantly, a small but undeniable current of power flowed into him. It was like a jolt of ice-cold, pure water down his spine, banishing all fatigue, sharpening his senses to a painful degree. The scar on his chest, the one that had been a constant, dull throb of pain, suddenly went silent. It was just there, cold and numb. He felt stronger. He felt lucid. He had performed his first true heretical act. Not for greed, not for hate, but for the pride of believing he could control the fire. He began to read the first page, and as he did not feel the first chain, invisible and cold, lock itself around his soul. The Garonne Nebula campaign should have been a disaster. Arturos's fleet arrived to find the Orc armada larger than even the Forbidden Tome had predicted. It was a green tide of scrap metal and raw aggression, a force that outnumbered the Crimson Sabre's fleet 3-1. His captains urged a tactical withdrawal, a consolidation of forces with the Imperial Navy. Standard doctrine. Pious, sensible, and, in this case, suicidal. Arturos stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, the book's truth burning in his mind. He saw the patterns the Orcs would follow. He saw the critical flaw in their flagship's void, shielding a harmonic disruption that would only manifest after it fired its main batteries for the third time. He saw a path through the asteroid field that his own navigators had deemed impassable, a path that would put his strike cruisers directly onto the flank of the Orc transport ships. He countermanded his captains. He gave a series of precise, seemingly insane orders. Fire all torpedoes at these coordinates. Now he commanded, pointing to an empty patch of void. Minutes later, a squadron of Orc escorts, previously cloaked, blipped into existence directly in the torpedo's path, vaporized before they could even raise shields. He ordered his main batteries to hold fire, waiting, until the Orc flagship's third salvo, and then he unleashed a single, devastating volley that struck the flagship's generatorium, turning the massive vessel into a silent, expanding fireball. It was a masterpiece, a flawless, perfect victory achieved with minimal Astartes casualties. The fleet hailed him as a tactical savant, a true son of Guilliman blessed by the Emperor himself. Arturos stood alone in his scriptorium after the battle, listening to the celebrations. He felt no pride. He felt only the cold, addictive rush of the power that had guided his hand. He had not deduced the enemy's plan. He had not outthought the Orc war boss. He had simply known. The power from the book, the whispers of the architect of fate, had laid the enemy's mind bare. He justified it instantly. The purpose justifies the means. I have saved millions of Imperial lives. I have saved my warriors. This is control. This is strength. This. But he had been seen. Chaplain Varus, the master of sanctity for the Crimson Sabres, had been on the bridge during the final moments of the battle. Varus was an old warrior, his face a skull-like mask of scars and righteousness, his faith as hard and unyielding as the adamantium head of his Crozius Arcanum. He had stood beside Arturos chanting the litanies of hate, and he had felt it. He had felt the unnatural chill in the air, seen the faint purple corona that flickered in Arturos's eyes as he gave his impossible commands. He had sensed the wrongness of the perfect precognitive victory. Days later, Varus entered the chapter master's scriptorium. He did not ask for permission. The heavy doors hissed open, and the chaplain stood there, his black armor a stark void against the light of the corridor. His skull helm was magnetically locked to his belt. "Arturos," he said. His voice was a low growl, like stones grinding together. "We must speak." Arturos looked up from his study of the tactical maps. The forbidden book was hidden, but its presence felt like a scream in the room. "Chaplain Varus, what troubles you?" "The victory in the Garonne Nebula," Varus said, stepping inside. The door sealed behind him. "It was too clean. Your commands. You did not anticipate. You saw." He gestured to Arturos's chest, where the unhealing scar from Xylos lay hidden beneath his robes. "Ever since that wound, a shadow has clung to you, my lord." I dismissed it as weariness. I was wrong. Varus's eyes scanned the room, lingering on the locked stasis chest where Arturos kept the tome. There is a stench of the witch in here. A stench of the... He paused, the word itself a poison. Warp. Arturos went still. His dual hearts beat a slow, heavy drum. This was the moment. The precipice. He could confess. He could throw himself on the mercy of the chapter, accept the chaplain's judgment, and be cleansed either by penance or by death. Or, "You are overstepping, Varus Arturos," said his voice, dropping to a cold monotone. "Your zeal clouds your judgment." "Zeal is my judgment!" Varus roared, taking a step forward, his hand gripping the hilt of his crozius. "I see the fissure in your soul, Arturos, the pride, the ambition. He is preying on it. Renounce it. Give me the source of this corruption, and let us burn it together. Let us save your soul before it is too late." Varus was right. He was loyal. He was a true servant of the Emperor. And in that moment, Arturos knew that Varus was the single greatest threat to his power. The power he needed to save the Imperium. The power he would not give up. "You are right," Varus Arturos whispered, rising from his chair. He seemed to shrink in repentance. I have been weak. The artifact, it is here." He gestured toward the stasis chest. Help me destroy it." Relief washed over the chaplain's harsh features. He lowered his hand from his weapon. "Brother, it is not too late. The Emperor protects." As Varus turned his gaze to the chest, Arturos moved. He moved with the unnatural speed the book had granted him, a blur of motion that Varus, for all his Astartes prowess, could not track. Arturos did not reach for his chainsword or his bolt pistol. He grabbed the chaplain's own ritual dagger from its scabbard. Varus spun back, his eyes wide with shock, but he was too slow. Arturos drove the blade up under the chaplain's breastplate, piercing one of his hearts. It was a mortal wound, even for a space marine. Varus gasped, a wet, crimson sound. He looked down at the hilt protruding from his armor, then up at his chapter master's face. Arturos's eyes were no longer those of a noble commander. They were cold, empty, and burning with a faint, violet light. "Why?" Varus choked, sinking to his knees. "The means are justified by the end," Arturos said, his voice devoid of all emotion. He pulled the blade free, and as Varus slumped to the floor, he cut the chaplain's throat to silence him forever. Arturos stood, breathing heavily, not from exertion but from the magnitude of what he had done. He had murdered his brother, his confessor, a loyal son of the Imperium. He had done it not in anger but with cold calculation. He had done it to protect his secret, to protect his power. He looked down at the cooling body of Varus. There was no going back. There was no confession, no absolution. He had chosen. He had shed the blood of the faithful to protect the covenant of the damned. The path was set in stone. Not all who walk the path of damnation do so with the cunning of Arturos. For every soul seduced by knowledge, 1,000 more are consumed by a simpler, purer urge rage. Consider the tale of Argus Vaughan, Lord Marshal of the Brazen Horde. He did not begin as a heretic. He began as a loyal, if brutal, commander of the Cadian shock troops. He was a man defined by the crucible of the Cadian Gate, a bastion of humanity that knew nothing but unending, desperate war against the arch-enemy. He saw his world, his family, and his regiment consumed time and again by the tides of chaos. He saw bravery and sacrifice achieve nothing but a brief delay of the inevitable. His faith did not curdle into despair. It did not twist into a quest for forbidden knowledge. It simply burned away, calcified and hardened into a core of pure, undiluted hatred. He stopped praying to the Emperor for deliverance. He stopped asking for victory. He began to demand it. He began to take it. His descent began with a simple act of battlefield pragmatism. Pinned down by traitor forces, his commissar ordered a tactical withdrawal. Vaughan, seeing only the enemy before him, saw this as cowardice. He put his chainsword through the commissar's chest. "We do not retreat," he roared to his shocked troops. We kill, they charged, and fueled by his sudden shocking brutality, they won the engagement. He was reprimanded, but his effectiveness was undeniable. He began to cultivate this rage. He found a savage joy in the wet crunch of a skull beneath his boot, in the percussive impact of his bolt pistol, firing at point-blank range. He led his forces not with strategy, but with pure animalistic fury. His warriors, drawn from the most hardened veterans of 1,000 brutal campaigns, began to emulate him. They became less a regiment and more a war band of bloody-handed killers. His first true offering was unintentional. During the battle for the Shrine, he fought a World Eater's champion, a hulking brute in gore-stained armor. They dueled for an hour amidst the burning ruins, an axe blow for a sword swing. Vaughn, exhausted and wounded, finally disarmed his foe. The Chaos Marine on his knees simply laughed, blood bubbling from his vox grill. "Good," the berserker gurgled. "Good. Rage." Vaughn did not execute him in the Emperor's name. He did not recite the catechism of hate. He simply bellowed a wordless scream of raw animosity and hacked the Astartes' head from his shoulders. He lifted the helmeted skull high, his armor drenched in the arterial spray. "Blood," he roared. More blood, and something answered. A surge of unnatural strength flooded his limbs. His fatigue vanished, replaced by a boundless fiery energy. He felt no pain from his wounds, only a burning need for more conflict. He and his men tore through the remaining traitors, not as soldiers, but as a tide of butchers. They did not just kill, they slaughtered. They did not just take ground, they desecrated it. From that day, Vaughn was a marked man. He was no longer a servant of the Imperium. He was a servant of the act of killing itself. His warband abandoned all pretense of imperial doctrine. They painted their armor red. They took trophies. They began to fight anyone. If no Chaos forces were present, they would butcher Orc warbands. If no Orcs were present, they would purge planetary populations they deemed weak. Their crusade became a roving wave of slaughter, their only strategic goal, the accumulation of skulls for a throne they did not yet understand. Khorne, the Lord of Skulls, does not care from whence the blood flows, only that it flows. He does not whisper or plot. He simply watches and he rewards strength. Vaughn's strength became monstrous. His muscles swelled, straining and splitting his imperial carapace. He discarded his lasgun for a massive two-handed axe, a relic of a techno-barbarian king that constantly dripped with fresh gore. His voice became a permanent grating roar, his tactical orders dissolving into simple bellows of kill, maim, burn. He became a living engine of warfare, his heart a furnace powered by pure wrath. He no longer sought victory, only the fight. He slaughtered allies who tried to restrain him, butchered enemies who fled from him, and desecrated worlds in the name of his new, thirsty god. He was on the path of skulls, and every head he took was another stepping stone toward a throne of bone, his humanity dissolving with every gout of blood he spilled. This is the path Arturos walks. It is the road of the arrogant, the intellectual, and the desperate plotter. It is a maze built of lies where every victory is a new wall and every truth is a door opening onto a deeper deception. After the murder of Chaplain Varus, Arturos was forced to act. He declared the Master of Sanctity a martyr, killed in a surprise ambush by a hidden Lorga-worshipping cult within the Xylos system, a cult only he could now root out. He used the fleet's grief and rage as a weapon, directing it with the cold, precognitive clarity his forbidden tome provided. He purged 3 separate planetary governments, executing governors and priests, presenting their deaths as righteous vengeance for Varus. In truth, they were sacrifices. Each death, planned and executed according to the intricate symbols in his book, was an offering to the architect of fate. He became a master manipulator. He no longer led from the front, a beacon of imperial might. He commanded from the shadows of his scriptorium, now a place of glowing runes and whispered incantations. He orchestrated wars. He would leak false intelligence gleaned from his tome to inquisitorial agents sending them on crusades against his personal rivals. He would discover ancient prophecies that aligned perfectly with his own strategic goals, convincing his brother captains to commit their companies to seemingly vital campaigns that served only to weaken other chapters. His power grew, but it was not the raw physical might of the Coronate champion. It was the power of the mind, the power of the warp itself. He steeped himself in forbidden lore. He had sought knowledge to save the Imperium, but now he sought knowledge for its own sake, and for the power it gave him over others. He learned the secret names of minor demonic entities and bound them, using them as spies and assassins. He learned to project his consciousness outside his body, walking unseen through the halls of his own ship, listening to the private counsels of his men, rooting out suspicion before it could even blossom into dissent. His psychic potential, dormant in all space marines, erupted. He could kill a man with a focused thought, crush a servitor's skull with a gesture. But this was crude. His true strength was in manipulation. He could implant suggestions, twist memories, make a loyal warrior see a trusted ally as a lurking traitor. He became the puppet master of his own chapter, pulling strings that reached across the sector. But the changer of ways gives no gift without a price, and that price is transformation. Tzeentch's blessings are mutations, but mutations of a strange and arcane beauty. Arturos's body began to change. His unhealing scar no longer wept blood. It wept pure, crystalline energy. His eyes, once the steel gray of a commander, became deep, swirling pools of violet and blue nebulae of impossible colors. When he was deep in concentration, a faint feathered corona of light would shimmer around his head, a mockery of a saint's halo. His armor warped to match his new purpose. The crimson ceramite of his chapter became a deep, iridescent blue, shifting in the light. Runes and sigils drawn from the pages of his book appeared, etched into the plates, glowing with internal power, as if branded from within. His flesh and the machine of his power armor began to fuse. Cables and wires became veins. Ceramite plates became a hardened carapace. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a sorcerer. He was a spider at the center of a galactic web of his own making. Every successful plot, every perfectly executed manipulation, every soul sacrificed on the altar of his greater good drew him deeper into the labyrinth. He believed he was in control, that he was the master of his own destiny, using chaos as a tool. He was blind to the final chilling truth that his every move, his every brilliant plan, his very ambition was nothing more than a single intricate thread in the unknowable infinite tapestry of Tzeentch himself. He was not the plotter, he was the plot. Not all who fall seek power or knowledge. Some seek only an end to suffering. This is the seduction of Nurgle, the great corrupter, the Lord of Pestilence. His path is not one of ambition but of despair. It is the embrace of the inevitable, the final shuddering surrender to entropy. Countess Malthina of the House. Glot, ruler of the hive world Septus, was a creature of profound terror. She was not a warrior. She was not a schemer. She was simply a mortal woman obsessed with her own mortality. Her world was a bastion of imperial industry, but it was also a cesspit of plague and pollution. She lived in the highest spire, sealed away from the toxic clouds and rabid citizenry, existing in a hermetically sealed bubble of recycled air and Medica-grade antiseptics. Her fear was a physical thing. She washed her hands 100 times a day. She executed attendance for a single moist cough in her presence. She spent billions of thrones on rejuvenate treatments, her skin stretched tight and waxy over ancient brittle bones. But she could not stop the clock. She could feel the slow, inexorable decay in her joints, the thinning of her blood, the failing of her organs. The Imperium, for all its might, could not offer her true immortality. It could only offer a slower death. Her fall began in a medici chamber. A new malady, a weeping skin condition that none of her chirurgeons could identify, had taken root on her arm. They called it the sepulchre weep. It resisted all treatment. In her terror and delirium she screamed. She did not scream for the Emperor, for he had offered no solace. She did not scream for a cure, for her doctors had none. She screamed into the void a raw, animalistic cry of, "No, I will not die. I will not end," a voice answered. It did not come from the warp. It came from a leprous beggar prophet her guards had dragged in from the underhive, a man they were to execute for spreading dissent. He was covered in sores, his flesh bloated and green, yet he smiled with a beatific, grandfatherly joy. "Death is not the end, my countess." He bubbled, his voice wet and rasping. "It is merely a change. The flesh rots, yes, but in that rot new life blooms. The maggot, the fly, the blessed bacteria. Life endures." He spoke of a God who loved all things, a God who did not demand perfection but cherished imperfection, a God who saw disease not as a curse but as a gift, a blessing of resilience, a way to be free from the fear of pain, free from the terror of the end. He spoke of Grandfather Nurgle. Malthina, in her final desperate hour, listened. The prophet offered her the blessing. She had him brought to her, and in a final act of horrifying surrender, she kissed his plague-ridden lips. The transformation was immediate, and it was a release. The terror that had defined her entire life vanished, replaced by a warm, numb acceptance. The sepulchre weep on her arm did not recede. It bloomed. Her skin split open not in pain, but in a grotesque fecundity. Her body, once frail and withered, swelled with a hideous vitality. She became bloated, her fine silks tearing as her form expanded with corpse gas and unnatural life. Her organs rotted, but they did not fail. They simply continued teeming with a billion strains of new joyful diseases. She had found her immortality. She was no longer dying. She was simply eternally decaying. She became the matron of the blessed pox. She who had once feared a single microbe now walked barefoot through the filth of her own underhive, spreading her gifts. Where she walked, the plague pits emptied their inhabitants, rising as bloated, smiling plague-bearers. She was a vector of divine pestilence. Her world did not fall to war. It was reborn in sickness. Her joy was infectious. She did not kill her enemies. She embraced them, bringing them into her burgeoning, rotting family. Her power was not in the blast of a weapon, but in the resilience of the grave. She could not be harmed. Blades passed through her tumid flesh with a wet suck, the wounds sealing instantly with thick green pus. Last shots were absorbed, their energy merely warming the squirming cauldron of her insides. She was a walking avatar of stagnation, a monument of joyous despair, eternally rotting, but never ever dead. Her every breath was a cloud of spores, her every touch a benediction of filth, and in her heart she felt nothing but the serene, all-encompassing love of the plague god. Where Khorne offers release through rage, Tzeentch through knowledge, and Nurgle through despair, the fourth and youngest god offers a different damnation. Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure, the lord of excess, does not promise victory or solace. Slaanesh promises sensation. The path to this god is one of perfectionism of sensation, pushed so far beyond the human limit that it shatters the soul, leaving only a raw, screaming nerve of pure, unadulterated desire. Maestro Luthien Duval was the greatest duelist on the noble world of Cyrene. He was not an Astartes. He was a mere mortal, but one blessed with a supernatural grace and speed that seemed inhuman. He lived in a society of opulent, decadent aristocrats, where life was a game of subtle insults, political marriages, and ultimately the ritual honor duel. Luthien was the undisputed master of this art. His blade, a priceless heirloom power foil, had ended the lives of 300 rivals. But mastery had brought him only boredom. He had achieved perfection, and perfection was a stagnant pool. He could predict every opponent's move. He felt no thrill in the fight, no rush of adrenaline. The finest wines, the most exotic foods, the most beautiful consorts, all had become bland, tasteless grey. He lived in a world of sensory overload, and yet he felt nothing. His fall began with a pursuit. He sought a new sensation. He began to escalate his duels. He would intentionally wound himself, letting the pain clear his senses just to feel something. He began to draw out his kills, turning the swift art of the duel into a protracted, agonizing ballet of torture. He studied his opponents' faces as they died, searching for the ultimate expression of agony, hoping to see in their eyes the transcendent emotion that eluded him. A cult, the locus of exquisite sensation, took notice. They were a secret society of nobles who, like him, had exhausted the limits of mortal pleasure. They approached him not with promises of power, but with a simple invitation. "You are a master of the art, maestro, but you have only ever painted with one color. We can show you the entire spectrum." He was inducted into their hidden lodge. Here art and cruelty were one and the same. They did not just kill, they turned killing into a symphony. They used exotic nerve toxins to heighten their victims' pain to unimaginable artistic peaks. They used psychosonic emitters to turn screams into music. They commissioned sculptures carved not from marble, but from the living, weeping flesh of their rivals. Luthien, at first repulsed, quickly became their greatest artisan. His pursuit of perfection found a new, terrible canvas. He became obsessed. He sought the perfect duel, a fight so skilled, so fraught with emotion, that it would provide the ultimate final sensation. He sought the perfect kill, the perfect note of pain, the perfect shade of agonizing crimson. His wish was granted. A demonette, a lesser servant of Slaanesh, was summoned by the cult. It appeared before him, a creature of androgynous, horrifying beauty, its movements a blur of impossible grace. It challenged him. The duel lasted for an hour. It was everything Luthien had ever dreamed of. He was pushed beyond his limits. Every parry was an agonizing bliss, every riposte a jolt of ecstatic pain. He had never felt so alive. He was laughing, crying, screaming, his senses on fire. Finally, the Daemonette's clawed hand darted past his guard, not to kill him, but to gently caress his cheek. The touch was like 1,000 volts of pure liquid sensation. It shattered his mind. He fell to his knees, not in defeat, but in absolute, soul-destroying rapture. He had finally felt it. From that moment he was a slave. He was the property of the Prince of Pleasure. His gifts were not mutations of rage or decay. He became beautiful, but it was a predatory, unnatural beauty. His skin became flawless, his eyes like polished gemstones, his voice a mesmerizing melody that could charm his foes, luring them into his blade's embrace. His senses were magnified 1,000-fold. The slightest touch was an explosion of feeling. The quietest sound was a deafening symphony. It was a torment, and it was paradise. He became a whirlwind of artistic slaughter. His warband was not an army. It was an entourage of depraved artists. They moved through the sectors of the Imperium not to conquer, but to experience. They redecorated worlds, turning planetary populations into vast, screaming art installations. Luthien, the perfect duelist, had found his new purpose. He was no longer seeking the perfect sensation for himself. He was a missionary dedicated to forcing his art, his pain, and his exquisite excess upon a galaxy that was simply too dull to appreciate it. He was a living conduit for the god of pleasure, his every act a prayer of ecstatic agony. The paths are different, but the toll is the same. The gifts of the Ruinous Powers are not given freely. They are a parasitic infection, a slow, agonizing renegotiation of the flesh and the soul, and every blessing is a tighter turn of the screw. These are not clean upgrades. This is not the sterile, sanctified augmentation of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This is biological and spiritual violation. For Arturos, the Sorcerer Lord, his fused armor is a prison of unending torment. The ceramite plates that have merged with his skin are no longer dead material. They are living chitinous growths. Nerves have entwined with power cables, meaning a minor diagnostic failure sends a jolt of pure agony through his system. The crystalline skin that has formed over his old flesh is brittle. It cracks when he moves, weeping not blood, but fine glittering dust, and the sensation is of 1,000 shards of glass grinding in his joints. His third eye, the shimmering corona of power, is a constant migraine-inducing sensory overload, showing him fractured futures and screaming impossibilities until he is never ever truly sane. For Argus Vaughan, the butcher of corn, his monstrous strength is a self-consuming fire. His muscles have swollen to such grotesque proportions that they have torn his own skin asunder. He is forced to hold his body together with crude iron stitches and plates of scrap metal bolted directly into his bone. His blood, now superheated by the god's rage, boils in his veins, and he lives in a state of constant, feverish, excruciating pain that can only be momentarily forgotten in the white-hot release of slaughter. He is not a warrior. He is a walking, screaming engine of agony, fueled by a hatred that is devouring him from the inside out. For Countess Malthina, the matron of plagues, her immortality is the most intimate of horrors. She is a walking ecosystem of death. She feels everything. She feels the joyous squirming of the billions of maggots that make up her subcutaneous flesh. She feels the slick, cool passage of corpse fluid through her ruptured lymphatic system. She feels the gentle, tickling burst of spores as they blossom from her lungs and tear through her throat with every loving breath. She is free from the fear of death, yes, but she has become a living grave, eternally conscious of her own putrefaction. And for Maestro Luthien, the artist of Slanesh, his heightened senses are the ultimate curse. He is a man with no skin exposed to the raw universe. The gentle hum of a ship's engine is a deafening, skull-splitting roar. The light of a common lumen strip is a blinding, agonizing fire. The touch of silk on his perfect skin feels like a sandblaster's grit. He is trapped in a body that provides only two sensations: unbearable, agonizing pain, or the momentary, ecstatic release he finds in the art of the perfect kill. He is a slave to the next sensation, a junkie desperate for a fix that will for just 1 second drown out the cacophony of his own existence. This is the price of the flesh. The price of the soul is far higher. They do not remember why they began. Arturos has a dim, cold memory of a place called the Imperium, a concept like loyalty. It is meaningless, a child's discarded toy. All that matters is the great game, the need to know the next secret, the intricate dance of the plot, the burning need to please the architect. Vaughan no longer remembers Cadia, his family, or his oaths. He only knows the thirst, the need for blood, the need for skulls, the red, roaring emptiness in his mind that demands to be filled with violence. They are no longer men or women. They are instruments. Their rich, complex, mortal personalities have been scoured away, leaving only the single obsessive, overriding will of their patron god. And there is the fear, the greatest, most terrible engine of all. Not all who walk these paths are successful. The gods are fickle. Their favor is a capricious, dangerous thing. To receive their gifts is to be in their debt, and to fail in that debt is to suffer a fate far worse than any death. Arturos witnessed it. In the battle for the Star of Morning, he faced another champion of Tzinch, a rival sorcerer who sought the same artifact. They dueled a clash of pure intellect and warp fire. Arturos, using a secret gleaned from his tome, outmaneuvered his rival, trapping him in a psychic feedback loop. The rival failed. He had displeased the Changer of Ways. His blessings turned on him. The sorcerer screamed a sound that tore at the fabric of reality. His transformation was not an ascension, it was a detonation. His body convulsed, bones snapping and reforming at random. His armor melted like wax, fusing with his flesh in a bubbling pinkish slurry. Eyes, dozens of them, tore open across his body, weeping tears of pure, raw energy. Feathers sprouted only to rot instantly. Mouths gaped open, screaming contradictory prophecies. In seconds, the proud sorcerer lord was gone. In his place was a chaos spawn, a vast, mindless, multi-limbed mass of shrieking, mutated flesh, a monument of failure, an eternity of agony given form. It was a being of pure, undiluted chaos, its only instinct to kill, and its only fate to be put down like a rabid beast. Arturos destroyed it, his heart's cold with a new, profound terror. He finally understood. This was not a negotiation. It was a razor's edge. He was on a tightrope, and below him was not just death, but that oblivion. He could not stop. He could not rest. He could not fail. He had to keep feeding the ambition of his god, keep proving his worth, keep climbing, or he too would be discarded, his soul and body rendered down into a screaming monument to failure. The promise of apotheosis was not a reward. It was the only possible escape from an eternity of mindless horror. The greater the aspirant's power, the louder their infamy echoed. The galaxy is not a vacuum. Actions on such a scale, heresy so profound, cannot go unnoticed. The aspirant, once a hunter, now became the most desperate of prey. For Arturos, his calculated conspiracies had grown too large to hide. The Crimson Sabers, once a respected chapter, were now spoken of in fearful, hushed whispers. They were a ghost fleet emerging from the warp to strike imperial worlds with brutal, inexplicable precision before vanishing once more. The High Lords of Terror, though ponderously slow, were not blind. The trail of dead inquisitors, of inexplicable civil wars between loyalist forces, and the sudden catastrophic failure of vital crusades all pointed to a single malevolent intelligence. The Ordo Malleus, the demon hunters, declared Arturos, now known in their dark halls as the Crimson Manipulator, a threat of the highest order. Excommunicate traitoris. The sentence was absolute. Where Arturos once commanded the loyalty of the Imperium, he now saw its might turned against him. Strike cruisers of the Grey Knights, the silver-armored, incorruptible elite, hunted him through the Immaterium itself. Their ships were hallowed, their warriors psychic blanks, or paragons of faith, rendering many of Arturos's sorcerous ploys useless. He was forced to run to hide his grand strategies, reduced to a desperate shell game as he evaded the most relentless hunters in the galaxy. But the Imperium was not his only enemy. The great game of chaos is not a cooperative one. It is a war of all against all, a constant shifting battle for the favor of the dark gods. Argus Vaughn, the champion of Khorne, discovered this on the blood fields of Vaxus. He had raised a skull pile so high it touched the toxic clouds, a tribute to his god that had drawn the blood god's full attention. But this attention bred jealousy. A rival warband, the Skull-Takers of Kabanda, a greater demon of Khorne, saw Vaughn's success not as a victory for their shared master, but as an affront to their own. They did not see an ally. They saw a competitor. The two Khornate hosts clashed in a battle of pure, unrestrained brutality. It was a war of no tactics, no mercy, a grinding, screaming melee of red armor and roaring chain axes. Vaughn was betrayed by his own. A Skull-Taker champion, one who had feasted in Vaughn's hall the night before, drove a demon axe into Vaughn's back. The Khornate champion felt no injustice, only rage. He turned his boiling blood, cauterizing the wound, and tore the traitor's head and spine from his body. He learned the final lesson of chaos. There is no loyalty. There is no brotherhood. There is only the climb and the hands of others pulling you back into the bloody mire. Malthina the Pox matron found her joyful garden invaded. A warband of Slaaneshi noise marines, led by Maestro Luthien himself, descended on her rotting paradise of Septus. They were not there to conquer, they were there to desecrate. They saw the stagnant, happy decay of Nurgle as a dull, monochromatic canvas. They unleashed their sonic weapons, cacophonous waves of pure, ecstatic sensation that were anathema to the plague god's numb acceptance. Luthien's warriors danced through her bloated, undying throngs, their blades singing not to kill, but to inflict the most exquisite, refined pain, a sensation Malthina's followers had been blessed to forget. The two forces of chaos tore the world apart, one seeking to liberate it with sensation, the other to comfort it with entropy. Arturos, Vaughn, Malthina, Luthien, all were cornered. The Imperium hunted them as traitors. Their fellow aspirants hunted them as rivals. They were isolated, wounded, and exhausted. The power they had spent centuries accumulating was now barely enough to ensure their survival. They were trapped. Their mortal-born power was no longer sufficient. Their demonic gifts had reached their limit. They faced annihilation at the hands of the Imperium betrayal, at the hands of fellow heretics, or worse, failure in the eyes of their god, and the resultant mindless oblivion of spawndom. There was only one path left, one final desperate gamble. They had to shed their mortal coil completely. They had to claim the final reward, the ultimate transformation that would place them beyond the reach of their enemies, beyond the knives of their rivals. They had to offer something so great, so profound, that their god could not refuse. They had to seek apotheosis. It was no longer a matter of ambition. It was a matter of survival. The climb had to be finished, or the fall would be eternal. The aspirant is broken, hunted, and desperate. Their power, once a torrent, is now a guttering candle in a hurricane. In this final moment of despair, when oblivion seems inevitable, they do not pray for deliverance. They demand their due. They cast their gaze fully into the roiling heart of the immaterium and offer a final, ultimate bargain. And the eye of their god, which had watched them with passing amusement, now focuses upon them with a terrible, consuming intensity. Arturos, his fleet shattered by a Grey Knight strike force, found himself cornered in the Anax system. His ship, the Will of the Architect, long since renamed from the Iron Will, was a crippled wreck venting atmosphere and plasma. The Knights were preparing their final boarding torpedoes. This was the end. His grand schemes, his centuries of plotting had led him to this. Failure, the vision of the shrieking chaos. Spawn, the fate of his rival, filled his mind. No, he retreated to his scriptorium, now a hellscape of arcing energy and screaming bound demons. He flung the forbidden tome open. "I have served you!" he roared, not at the walls but at reality itself. "I have given you war betrayal and 1 billion souls sacrificed on the altar of your ambition. I will not be your failed experiment. Give me the power to finish this, or let me burn it all." The vision came. Tzeentch did not speak. It simply showed him. It showed him the Anax system star. It showed him the ancient pre-imperial mechanism of unknown origin, a relic of the dark age of technology that lay dormant within the star's core, stabilizing it. And it showed him the precise 9,999 ritualistic syllables that, if spoken at the system's gravitational nexus, would overload that mechanism. It would not just destroy the star, it would turn it into a temporary raging warp rift, a beacon of pure change that would consume the entire sector, and the Grey Knight fleet with it. It was a task of impossible magnitude. He would have to teleport to the nexus point, a place of crushing gravity and searing heat, and hold his concentration long enough to recite the entire incantation while the purest warriors of the Imperium tore his ship and his mind apart. It was a final test of his will, his cunning, and his power. In the gore-slicked trenches of the world, Vax's Argus Vaughn faced a similar ultimatum. Betrayed by his allies, his brazen horde was reduced to a handful of warriors, surrounded by the victorious Skull-Takers and a newly landed force of Iron Hand Space Marines. He was trapped between the hammer of the Imperium and the anvil of his rivals. He spat a curse of bloody phlegm. He raised his gore-slicked axe to the bruised, smoking sky. Corner, he bellowed, a sound of cracked iron. "You want skulls? I will give you the skulls of your own chosen. I will give you the skulls of the Emperor's finest. I demand the strength to take them all." The call was answered. The sky did not change, but a new, terrible understanding entered Vaughn's mind. He was not being offered a way out. He was being given a target. The blood god did not care for his survival. He cared for the tally. The challenge was laid bare. Defeat them all. Defeat the greater Daemon Kabanda's champion. Defeat the Iron Hand's chapter master. Slay both Astartes' forces in a single apocalyptic act of slaughter. Build a throne of their skulls right here, right now, or die and be forgotten. Malthena, her world of Septus being cleansed by the ecstatic agonies of Luthien's warband, huddled in her original plague cathedral. Her children were dying, their joyful numbness pierced by the Slaneshi sonic weapons. Her god was losing. Her despair, once a comfort, became a new kind of fear, the fear of change of sensation. She sank her bloated hands into the pool of primordial filth at the heart of her temple. Grandfather, she gurgled a prayer of pure entropy. They bring noise. They bring pain. They bring feeling. End it. Let it all stop. I will give you the ultimate stillness. I will give you this entire world bound in your final perfect stasis. The vision granted to her was one of ultimate sacrifice. She was shown how to unlock the stasis plagues, the ancient viral weapons sleeping in the planet's core. Not just the gifts she had been spreading, but the true diseases. The ones that did not just end, but ended. The ones that brought about the final, perfect, cold peace. To do so would require her to merge with the planet's core, to become the living catalyst for a pandemic that would not only kill Luthien's forces, but every single living thing on Septus, including all her children and herself. It would be a planet-wide offering of perfect silent decay. In all cases, the test was the same. It was a task of apocalyptic, self-destructive, and monumental proportions. It was a demand for one final, universe-altering act of devotion. They gathered their forces, their power, their will. This was the last throw of the dice. Victory meant immortality. Failure meant an oblivion too terrible to name. The final wager was cast. Aboard his dying flagship, the will of the architect Arturos began his ritual. He ignored the roar of boarding torpedoes tearing through his hull, the screams of his warriors over the Vox as the Grey Knights purged them. It was irrelevant noise. He stood in his scriptorium, his body a swirling column of violet energy, and he began the teleportation. He did not teleport to a location. He teleported to a concept, the gravitational nexus point of the Anax system. He rematerialized in a place of crushed, non-existent space. His physical body screamed. 1,000 gravities sought to reduce him to a singularity. The raw, unfiltered heat of the star seared his fused armor. But he was a sorcerer of Tzeentch. He crafted a shield of pure will, a paper-thin bubble of reality that held annihilation at bay for a microsecond. And he began to speak. Each of the 9,999 syllables of the old curse echoed from his mind. Each word was a blasphemy that warped physics. The Grey Knights on his ship felt it. Their librarians screamed a warning, attempting to assault his mind across the void. Arturos felt their minds like spears of ice against his fragile defense. He staggered. 2,000 words he hissed through clenched teeth, crystalline blood weeping from his eyes and ears. He focused on the change, on the plot, on the promise. 8,000 words. He felt his shield crack, his armor beginning to tear from his very flesh. He saw his ship, the will of the architect, shatter into a cloud of glittering debris as its reactors breached. He was alone. 9,999. He spoke the final syllable. For a moment, nothing. Then the Anax star flinched. The ancient mechanism within it, overloaded by the impossible logic of the warp, reversed its polarity. The star did not explode. It imploded. And then it vomited. A column of raw, pure immaterium, the color of a nightmare, erupted from its core, a temporary but hyper-violent warp storm. It consumed the Grey Knight fleet. The hallowed ships, the incorruptible warriors, all were dissolved into screaming energy, their souls sucked into the vortex like ash in a gale. It consumed the entire Anax system. Billions of souls on its planets were harvested in a single silent second, a feast of spirit stuff so rich it demanded the gods' attention. Arturos, at the epicenter of the destruction, should have been instantly annihilated. But he was not. The raw warp energy recognized him. It was his master. It poured into him not to destroy, but to claim. Meanwhile, on Vaxus, Argus Vaughn made his final move. Surrounded, bleeding, he laughed, a wet, broken sound. He did not try to flee. He did not try to defend. He attacked. He charged the Skulltaker champion, ignoring the wounds his attendants carved into his flesh. He swung his axe in an arc that would cleave them both. The Skulltaker raised his own weapon to parry, but Vaughn, fueled by his god's desperate favor, was stronger. His axe bit deep, shearing through the champion's weapon and his body from shoulder to hip. Then, without pausing, he turned on the Iron Hands captain, who was advancing his storm bolter, roaring. Bolts exploded against Vaughn's flesh, tearing away chunks of meat and metal, but he did not slow. He was an object of pure momentum and rage. He smashed into the Astarte captain, his sheer weight cracking the warrior's bones. He bore the Iron Hand to the ground, cast his axe aside, and began to punch. He hammered his fists against the captain's helm again and again, a primal rhythm of meat on ceramite, until the helm cracked, and what lay beneath was only a red paste. The remaining warriors of all three sides, Brazen Horde Skulltakers and Iron Hands, paused horrified at the pure animalistic brutality. Vaughn rose drenched head to toe, not just in their blood, but his own, his body barely holding together. He roared one final, ultimate challenge, and the Chaos God focused its full, undivided will upon this mortal who had offered so much. The blood from the dead began to flow, not into the ground, but towards Vaughn. The blood of a rival champion, the blood of a loyalist chapter master. Thousands of gallons of it. It swirled around him in a crimson vortex, a gory, wet acceptance of his sacrifice. The reward had been approved. This is the moment of ascension. It is not a coronation. It is not an anointing. It is a birth. And like all births, it is a thing of screaming, visceral, and agonizing horror. It is the final, brutal death of the mortal. At the nexus of the Anax system, Arturos the man ceased to exist. He screamed as the raw power of the warp, the very essence of Tzeentch, flooded his being. His physical body, his transhuman flesh, was the last pathetic barrier. It was a dam of paper trying to hold back an ocean of pure potential. It burst. His scream was a psychic shockwave that rippled across the sector. His body began to convulse, a puppet dancing on the strings of a mad god. His skeleton, the mighty frame of a space marine, was the first to go. It did not grow. It shattered. 1,000 fractures spider-webbed through his bones as they were broken and remade simultaneously. His ribs tore free from his spine, arching outwards like the framework of new, vast wings. His skull elongated his jaw, distending as his human-sized brain was liquefied and reformed into a new, complex organ capable of comprehending the impossible. His fused armor, the blue-black carapace, melted. It was no longer metal. It flowed like hot wax, mixing with his boiling blood and dissolving flesh. The suit that had protected him for centuries became the raw material for his new skin. The fibers of the black carapace, the interface between marine and armor, became a network of living, glowing sigils, burning themselves into his new demonic flesh. Then the immaterium truly took hold. His body now a slurry of molten ceramite, vaporized bone dust, and psychic energy began to grow. He expanded a cloud of screaming potential, swelling to the size of a battle barge. The agony was absolute. It was the pain of a billion cells being simultaneously destroyed and created. It was the agony of a finite soul being forcibly stretched to encompass the infinite. From the swirling cloud of madness, a new form emerged, clawing its way back into reality. It was a thing of impossible geometry. Vast feathered wings woven from the captured souls of the Grey Knight fleet tore free from its back, each feather an eye that wept pure, solidified magic. Its flesh was hard as diamond, the color of a shifting bruise. Its face was no longer human, but a regal avian mask of living crystal. Horns carved from the frozen concepts of lies swept back from its brow. It was Arturos, and yet it was not. It was a new being, a demon prince born in the heart of a dying star. Its first cry was not a word, but a sound of pure change, a note that rewrote the laws of physics in its immediate vicinity. On Vaxus, Argus Vaughn's transformation was no less brutal. The vortex of blood swirling around him stopped, and then it attacked. It was not a gentle anointing, it was a pressurized, boiling deluge. The blood forced its way into his body, into his every pore, his screaming mouth, his eyes, his open wounds. He fell to his knees, choking. His own superheated blood, now mixed with the demonic vintage, boiled over. His skin split. His muscles, already grotesquely large, exploded. They did not grow. They detonated in size, tearing free of his crude iron stitches, becoming plates of living brass-colored sinew. His spine snapped, not in weakness, but to lengthen, adding yards to his height, in a single gut-wrenching crack. The rage that had fueled him, the simple anger of a mortal man, was scoured away, replaced by the pure, divine, absolute rage of the blood god himself. It was a fire that burned away his mind, his memories, his very identity, leaving only a single glowing coal of pure, destructive purpose. His skin hardened into thick crimson scales. His face, once human, melted and reformed, his jaw unhinging and splitting to form a fanged bestial maw from which a brass-studded tongue lolled. His legs broke and reset the bones, fusing and twisting into the powerful digitigrade legs of a beast. The gore-caked axe in his hand, the relic of a barbarian king, was now a part of him. Its metal fused with his arm, the blade's edge becoming his new claws, the haft his new forearm. The surviving warriors, both loyalist and traitor, watched in frozen terror. The man who was Argus Vaughn swelled his armor plates, shattering and falling away like a discarded shell. From the bloody chrysalis of the mortal champion, a new monster arose. It was a mountain of raw, knotted muscle skin, the color of dried blood, and eyes of molten brass. It was a being of pure, unthinking slaughter, a demon prince of Khorne. It opened its new, monstrous mouth, and the first sound it produced was a reality-shattering bellow of pure, undiluted hatred, a sound that caused the very ground to bleed. The apotheosis was complete. The mortal was dead. The demon was born. Power, for the newborn prince of Tzeentch, floating in the roaring psychic wound where the Anax system had been. The sensation was total. He was no longer a being of flesh inside a universe. He was the universe. He could feel the currents of the immaterium as a mortal feels the wind, the screams of the consumed souls as a symphony. His mind expanded and remade, perceived time not as a line, but as a fractured, multidimensional tapestry. A surviving Grey Knight cruiser, warped and crippled, but its faith shields miraculously holding, drifted from the debris cloud. Its final defiant act was to fire a full salvo of macro cannons. Before this would have been a threat. Now it was a joke. The demon prince did not move. He did not shield himself. He simply willed. The cluster of city-sized adamantium shells stopped frozen in the void. He examined them, curious. He saw their past, their forging in the fires of Mars. He saw their future, their intended impact. He found the future uninteresting. He willed again. The shells ceased to exist. They did not explode. Their reality was simply unwritten. He turned his vast crystalline gaze upon the ship itself. He flexed his new conceptual muscles. The ship and the hundreds of incorruptible souls within it imploded, compressed into a single, silent point of light that was then extinguished. He was immortal, he was a god, and then he felt the chain. It was not a physical thing, it was a pull, a vast, undeniable psychic leash that was attached to the very core of his newfound being. It yanked, and his entire godlike consciousness recoiled in a new kind of agony. It was the will of his master. It was the will of Tzeentch. He was not free. He was property. He had not been rewarded. He had been promoted. He had been a trusted mortal agent, a pawn with aspirations. Now he was a demon prince, a knight in the great game, a far more valuable, powerful, and expendable piece. The power he wielded was not his own. It was loaned. It was the energy of the god flowing through him, and it could be recalled, restricted, or repurposed at any moment. He tried to think of his own will. He tried to remember his original purpose: to save the Imperium. The thought was alien, a nonsensical glyph from a forgotten language. His own ambition, the very engine that had driven him for centuries, had been hollowed out and replaced with the singular, all-consuming will of his god. He was a slave with the power of a galaxy, but a slave nonetheless. He had exchanged the prison of mortality for the prison of eternity. On Vaxas the Gorelord, the being that was once Argus Vaughan, felt the same truth. His rage was boundless, his strength capable of shattering mountains. He tore the remaining Iron Hands and Skull Takers to pieces. But as the last body fell, his rage did not subside. It could not. He was bound to it. He was a furnace that must burn, and his god would forever point him at new fuel. He was not a warrior. He was a weapon sentient and forever tormented, but a weapon nonetheless. And then both new-made princes felt a new presence. It was not the overwhelming cosmic pressure of their gods. It was a shadow, a cold, ancient malice that slithered into their consciousness. It was the first, the Dark Master, the one who had ascended before all others, who had dared to challenge the Four, and who had been cursed for his ultimate hubris, Be'lakor. They felt his presence as a wave of pure, undiluted spite. He was the one cursed to be the herald of all who came after the shadow, who must anoint every new-made slave. A whisper older than the Imperium echoed in their souls. Another fool who thinks the chain is a crown. You are a god, you are a thing, a tool given a grander name. And I, who was first, must bear witness to every strutting, arrogant mortal who claws his way into this endless, gilded cage. Know this, slave, you are mighty, but you are nothing. You are just one more voice in the eternal screaming chorus of the damned. The new demon princes, one a creature of infinite change, and the other of boundless rage, both felt their first true demonic emotion, the cold, bitter realization of their place. They were lords over mortals, but they were slaves to the gods. And even here in the ranks of the immortal there was hierarchy. There was jealousy. And there was an eternity of it stretching before them. This agonizing, self-destructive path to apotheosis is the fate of mortals. It is the pinnacle of human ambition, the ultimate expression of a single finite soul bartering itself away for power. But there are others, beings who were never truly mortal to begin with, beings whose ascension was not the end of a personal journey, but a galaxy-altering event, the demon primarchs. They are the ultimate tragedy, the ultimate betrayal, the ultimate prize in the great game. They were not mere men. They were demigods forged by the master of mankind himself, each a perfect, singular expression of war. Their fall was not a stumble into a hidden trap. It was the collapse of a star, a cataclysm that tore the Imperium in half and set the galaxy aflame for 10,000 years. Their ascensions were not small personal rituals. They were epic, mythic betrayals paid for with the souls of entire legions. When Angron, the broken, enraged primarch of the World Eaters, finally died on Nuceria, the world he hated his legion ravaged by the butcher's nails. Lorga, the first to fall, the Golden Sun, conducted a ritual of blood that bound his brother's raging, dying soul. Khorne did not just claim a new champion, he seized a demigod. Angren's agony, his lifetime of pure, unadulterated rage, was forged into a new divine form. He was not just given strength, he became strength, a raging brass-skinned titan of pure, undiluted hatred, his pain and his power made eternal. He is not a slave. He is the avatar of the rage that fuels his god. When Mortarion, the Lord of Death, and his entire Death Guard legion were trapped in the warp, lost and adrift, their indomitable endurance was put to the ultimate test. The plague of Nurgle, the Eater of Lives, found them. It did what no fleet, no Xenos, no loyalist could do. It broke them. It ravaged their transhuman bodies, causing them unending, agonizing torment. Mortarion, the master of endurance, watched his perfect sons bloat and rot, begging for an end. In that final moment of ultimate despair, Mortarion surrendered. He gave himself and his entire legion to the Grandfather. His ascension was not a reward for devotion, but the ultimate act of capitulation. He became the chosen son of Nurgle, a monstrous, decaying lord of pestilence, his despair and resilience given dominion over a galaxy of new diseases. Fulgrim the Phoenician, the perfect son of the Emperor's children, sought perfection in all things. This obsession became the crack through which Slaanesh poured its influence. His journey into excess was an artistic masterpiece of depravity, culminating in his legion's descent into ecstatic slaughter and his own possession by a greater demon. His final ascension was a reward for this grand opera of sensation, transforming the perfect Primarch into the perfect monster, a beautiful serpentine and utterly depraved creature who embodies the limitless appetite of his patron, and Magnus the Crimson King, the one-eyed scholar. His was the greatest tragedy of all. He did not seek power for himself. He sought knowledge to save his father. His arrogance, his belief that he alone could master the warp, led him to break the Emperor's one command. For this his legion was censured, his world burned. In his grief and rage at this rejection, Tzientch, the god he had so long skirted, finally claimed him. His ascension was a shattering, a fragmentation of his mighty soul, binding the broken pieces into a new, cyclopean form of red-skinned, feathered might. He is the greatest of the sorcerer princes, but he is a slave to the very truth he once sought to master. These are not the same as Arturos or Vaughn. They are the sons of the gods, the true princes of the damned. Their presence in the warp is not a ripple, but a tidal wave. They command legions of demons and their own fallen sons. Their power dwarfs that of a mortal ascended prince as a star dwarfs a candle. They are a constant, terrifying reminder of the stakes of the great game, and their fall is the wound in the galaxy that will never, ever heal. So what is a demon prince? It is the ultimate screaming paradox of the dark millennium. It is a monument to the flawed heart of all mortal ambition. It is a cosmic jest, a final acidic punchline delivered by laughing, thirsting gods. The aspirant, whether it was the proud Arturos, the furious Vaughn, the terrified Malthena, or the decadent Luthien, began their journey by seeking to transcend. They sought to break the chains of mortality. They saw the limits of the flesh, the weakness of their finite span, the inefficiency of their human constraints, and they yearned for more. More time, more power, more knowledge, more sensation. They were willing to sacrifice everything, their oaths, their brothers, their very souls, to achieve this godhood. And in the final agonizing moment of apotheosis, they succeeded. In that success, they were utterly and eternally destroyed. The being that remains is an irony given form. It is a hollowed-out mockery of the mortal who began the journey. The demon prince of Tzientch, once Arturos, has the power to unwrite reality, but he has no will of his own with which to guide it. His mind, once a fortress of strategic genius, is now a howling open plain across which the winds of his master's plots blow, and he is but a leaf carried upon them. His quest for knowledge has ended with him becoming a mere vessel for knowledge, his identity erased. The demon prince of Khorne, the bloody monster that was Vaughn, has the strength to shatter mountains, but he cannot choose to show mercy. He cannot choose to rest. He cannot remember why he fights. He is a walking sentient nuclear weapon, his fury a constant agonizing fire, and his leash is held by a god who will point him at target after target for eternity until all that is left is the thirst. This is the nature of their new life. It is not a life at all. It is an unlife, a state of being defined by suffering and servitude. Their gifts are the very source of their torment. Their immortal demonic bodies are prisons of heightened, specialized agony. Their new godlike senses are the instruments of their eternal torture. They have escaped the gentle final peace of mortal death, only to be thrown into a conscious, unending state of execution, and they are utterly alone. They are hunted now and forever by the Imperium they once served. To the Ordo Malleus they are the ultimate target. To the Grey Knights they are the ultimate blasphemy. They will never know a moment's peace, for the hounds of the Emperor are relentless, and they will be hunted across the stars and through the void of the warp itself until the final dying days of the galaxy. They are despised by their new peers. In the chaotic swirling hell of the Immaterium, they are upstarts. They are the never-born, the true demons, who are fragments of the gods themselves, and they look upon these mortal ascended princes with a unique, bitter contempt. They are seen as filth as mortals who cheated their way into immortality. They are envied for their solid forms, their ability to act in the material realm, and for this they are hated. They have no allies in the great game, only rivals. They have no friends, only subjects who will betray them, and masters who will discard them. They are not gods. They are the most powerful, most tragic, most monstrous slaves in the creation. They have merely exchanged one set of limitations for another, trading the frailties of the flesh for the iron-clad chains of a divine, capricious will. They are puppets given the power of a star, but they are still puppets. They are the ultimate tools, sentient and screaming, forged to wage their master's wars. Be'lakor I, the Master of Shadows, knew the truth. Their crown is a collar, and their throne is the head of a pin upon which they are forced to dance for their master's amusement. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. In this suffocating, dying galaxy, faith is a shield, and duty is a fortress. But ambition is not a virtue. It is not a path to glory. Ambition is a disease of the soul. It is the first fatal crack in the spirit's defenses. It is the whisper that promises you more than service. It is the lie that you are special. It is in the end a death sentence. And demon princehood, it is not the reward for a life of treachery. It is simply the beginning of an eternal, agonizing execution,